What if the lighthouse keeper didn't die alone? What if something was waiting for him at the top of those stairs? What if the little girl people see inside those walls was never actually a child at all? What if the truth about what happened inside the St. Augustine Lighthouse has been buried, quietly, on purpose, for over 100 years? The St. Augustine Lighthouse stands 165 feet tall on Anastasia Island in Florida. It has been standing since 1874. Millions of people have visited it. Tour guides walk them up its 219 steps every single day. They talk about history, they talk about the view, they smile and they point at the horizon, but they never tell you what really goes on inside those walls after the last visitor leaves. They never tell you what the security cameras have caught, and they definitely never tell you what happened to the family who lived there in the 1870s when the lighthouse was still being built. Let's start with something that most people miss entirely. Before the lighthouse was even finished, 3 young girls drowned in a construction barrel filled with water on the property. They were the daughters of Hezekiah Pitty, the superintendent overseeing the construction. Their names were Mary, Eliza, and a third girl whose name was never officially recorded. They were playing on a cart near a water barrel. The cart tipped and they fell in. 2 of them died before anyone could reach them. The third was pulled out just in time, but she never spoke about what she saw in that water. Not once, not ever. Now here's where it gets unsettling. Investigators and paranormal researchers who have spent time inside the lighthouse since then have reported the same thing over and over again. A little girl giggling in an empty stairwell, the sound of small feet running across the upper floors when no one is up there, lights turning on inside the lantern room at night with no explanation. But the detail that makes your skin crawl is this: the laughter doesn't echo. In a 165-foot brick tower, sound should bounce everywhere. It should echo for seconds. But witnesses say the giggling simply stops the moment they reach the top of the stairs, as if the sound was never real, as if it was placed directly inside their ear. Lighthouse staff have refused to work night shifts alone. That's a fact. It's documented. One security guard reportedly quit after a single overnight shift in 2002, leaving only a handwritten note that said, quote, "Something touched my shoulder, and when I turned around, there was nothing there, but the temperature dropped so fast my breath fogged." That note was never made public by the Lighthouse Foundation. We only know about it because a former employee talked. They didn't just see things, they felt them. And whatever is in that lighthouse, it doesn't want you to leave the same way you came in. Stay with us, because what happened next changed everything. Here's the part nobody talks about. In 1873, 1 year before the lighthouse officially opened, the head keeper, William Harn, wrote something in his logbook that was quietly removed from the public archives. A researcher named David Bennett discovered a photocopy of the original entry in 2011, buried in a box of uncatalogued documents at a Florida Historical Society. The entry, dated October 14, 1873, read simply, "Saw her again at the top. She was watching the water. She does not blink." Harn was not known as a superstitious man. His other log entries are dry, factual, full of wind measurements and weather reports, but that single line stands apart from everything else he ever wrote. Researchers have tried to explain it. Some say he was describing a real person, a local woman who wandered onto the property at night. But the lighthouse was surrounded by water on 3 sides. There was no easy way in or out after dark. Others say it was a hallucination caused by exhaustion or the fumes from the kerosene lamps. But Harn's health records show he was in perfect condition. He had no history of mental illness, no fever, no reported illness at all during that month. What makes this even stranger is what happened to Harn himself. In 1875, just 1 year into his official duties as keeper, he simply requested a transfer. No reason given. He left the lighthouse, moved to a different county, and refused to speak about his time at St. Augustine for the rest of his life. His daughter, interviewed decades later in 1921, said her father would leave the room whenever the lighthouse was mentioned. She said he once told her, "Some places hold things that were never meant to be held." She didn't know what he meant. She said he looked terrified when he said it. Modern investigators have used thermal imaging cameras inside the lighthouse and captured anomalies that are difficult to explain. On the staircase, between the 80th and 100th step, the temperature consistently drops by 9 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of the season, regardless of the weather outside. Engineers have checked the structure. There are no vents, no gaps, no openings that could cause a localized cold spot of that size. The building is solid brick. One investigator said the cold spot doesn't just feel cold, it feels heavy, like the air itself doesn't want you to pass through it. And then there's the painting. In 1988, a maintenance worker refinishing a section of the interior wall near the base of the staircase found a series of small handprints pressed into the plaster beneath multiple layers of old paint. They were the size of a child's hands, palm flat, fingers spread. There were 11 of them in total, arranged in a spiral pattern going upward. Nobody knows who put them there or when. The lighthouse was built in 1874. Those handprints could have been there since the beginning. What we want to know is this: if those handprints belong to a child who died on this property before the lighthouse even opened, what was she trying to show us? We'd love to hear your theory in the comments below. If this story gave you chills, make sure you've subscribed to Lost Beyond Sight and keep watching, because the next lighthouse story gets even darker. Three men walked into a lighthouse. None of them ever walked out. No bodies were ever found. No distress signal was ever sent. The lighthouse log stopped mid-sentence. Their meal was still on the table, half-eaten, still slightly warm. Their chairs were pushed back as if they stood up in a hurry. The clock on the wall had stopped, and on the rocks below, 150 feet above the sea, investigators found something that made no logical sense whatsoever. A set of deep claw marks that no storm, no wave, and no human hand could have made. The Flannan Isles sit about 20 miles west of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. They are remote, brutal, and nearly unreachable for most of the year. The lighthouse on Island Moor, the largest of the islands, was only finished in 1899. It had been operating for barely a year when on December 26, 1900, the supply vessel Hesperus arrived with food, mail, and a replacement keeper. Captain James Harvey expected to see someone on the dock. He sounded the horn. Nobody came. He fired a flare. Still nothing. When crew members rowed to shore and entered the lighthouse, they found it completely empty. 3 experienced keepers, Thomas Marshall, Donald MacArthur, and James Duckett, had completely vanished. The official investigation concluded it was a rogue wave, a massive, unexpected wall of water that swept all 3 men off the island during a storm. Case closed, mystery solved. But here's what the official report conveniently left out. The storm didn't hit the island until December 17th. The last log entry was made on December 15th. That means there is a 2-day window, 2 full days, where nobody wrote anything, nobody sent a signal, nobody did anything at all. And the supply ship that passed the island on December 20th reported seeing the lights still functioning normally, which means whatever happened to those men, it didn't happen during the storm. It happened before it. But the details get worse. When investigators entered the kitchen, they found the table set for a meal. There were 3 chairs, and 2 of them were pushed neatly under the table. The third was knocked over backward and lying on the floor. The food was partially eaten. 1 oilskin coat was missing, but the other 2 were still hanging on their hooks near the door. This is important. If all 3 men had gone outside, they would have taken their coats. It was December in Scotland. The wind off those cliffs reaches hurricane force. No rational person goes outside in that weather without a coat. 1 man went out in a rush. The other 2 went after him. Why? What did they see? Thomas Marshall's log entries from the days before the disappearance are the most disturbing part of this entire story, and almost nobody talks about them in detail. On December 12th, he wrote, "Severe winds, the likes of which I have never seen before in 20 years. James Ducat has been quiet, and Donald was weeping. On December 13th, storm still raging, wind is screaming around the lighthouse, all 3 of us praying." And then on December 15th, the very last entry ever made, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." That was it. That was the last thing any of them ever wrote. Clear skies, calm water, and then nothing. They vanished on a perfectly clear day. Let's think about this carefully, because the official explanation starts to fall apart the moment you look at the actual geography of the island. The Flannan Isles, and not just remote, they are psychologically extreme. The island of Eilean Mor has no trees, no shelter, almost no flat ground. The wind doesn't just blow there, it screams. The cliffs are sheer drops into freezing black water. Sailors throughout history have considered the islands cursed. Local fishermen refused to set foot on them for centuries, leaving small offerings of bread and fish on the rocks from their boats instead. They called the islands the country of the other men, believing that invisible beings lived on them and did not welcome visitors. When the lighthouse was built, the construction crew reported strange experiences. Workers claimed to hear voices in the wind at night, not howling or moaning, but actual words in an unrecognizable language. Several workers refused to sleep on the island and instead rowed back to their support vessel each evening. One laborer reportedly walked into the sea on a calm evening for no apparent reason and had to be physically pulled back. He said afterward that he didn't remember walking toward the water at all. He said it felt like waking up from a dream already standing at the edge. Then there is the matter of the claw marks. This detail was documented by investigator Robert Muirhead, who led the official inquiry, but was buried in a footnote of his report and never discussed publicly. On the iron crane jib that sat on the western landing platform, the metal had been deeply scored in parallel lines, 3 lines each, spaced evenly apart. The scoring went across and downward. Muirhead noted in his private correspondence that no tool available to the keepers could have made those marks. The metal was thick iron, the grooves were deep. He wrote to a colleague that the marks appeared to have been made by something pulling itself up from below the cliff edge, gripping the iron to climb. Some researchers have proposed more grounded explanations over the years. Infrasound, the low-frequency sound produced by ocean waves crashing against cliff cavities, has been known to cause panic, nausea, and extreme psychological distress. Studies in the early 2000s confirmed that certain coastal rock formations act like natural infrasound speakers, generating frequencies that humans cannot hear but deeply feel. The sensation can trigger primal fear responses, disorientation, and in extreme cases, irrational behavior, including the urge to flee toward danger rather than away from it. The western cliffs of Eilean Mor are shaped exactly like the kind of cavity that produces infrasound most intensely. So here is the theory that ties everything together. Infrasound drove all 3 men to the edge of psychological breakdown over several days. It explains why Marshall wrote about weeping and praying on clear days when no storm was threatening. It explains why the third chair was knocked backward, someone standing up suddenly in a panic. It explains why one man went outside without his coat, already past the point of rational thinking. And then the sea took them, one at a time, on a morning when the water looked perfectly still. But here is the question that no theory, scientific or otherwise, has ever fully answered. If it was infrasound, if it was the sea, if it was nature, then who or what made those claw marks in solid iron on a cliff that no wave could reach? Tell us what you think happened in the comments. Share this story with someone who loves unsolved mysteries, and don't go anywhere, because our final lighthouse story carries a secret that has never been fully told.
Why do ships still wreck here even after the lighthouse was built? Why did a keeper describe seeing a figure standing on the water's surface in the middle of the night? Why do fishermen refuse to work this stretch of coast alone after dark? And why, in 1999, when workers were moving the lighthouse to protect it from the sea, did they find something sealed inside the foundation that was never supposed to be found at all? The Cape Hatteras Lighthouse stands on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and at 198 feet tall, it is the tallest brick lighthouse in the entire United States. It sits at the edge of what sailors have called the graveyard of the Atlantic for 4 centuries. More than 3,000 ships have sunk in the waters surrounding this coastline. The currents here are savage and unpredictable. 2 powerful ocean currents, the warm Gulf Stream and the cold Labrador Current, collide directly offshore, creating sudden violent weather, hidden sandbars, and water conditions that have destroyed everything from colonial schooners to World War II submarines. This is not a metaphor. The ocean floor here is literally carpeted in wreckage. The lighthouse was first built in 1803, then rebuilt in its current form in 1870. Its entire purpose was to warn ships away from Diamond Shoals, a series of shallow underwater sandbars that extend 14 miles offshore and appear without warning, even in calm seas. And it worked, mostly. But not entirely. Ships continued to sink here, not because the lighthouse failed to warn them, but because some captains, experienced men who knew these waters, turned toward the shoals instead of away. Investigators chalked it up to navigation error, but several surviving crew members over the decades described their captains giving the order to turn directly toward the dangerous shallows while appearing completely calm, almost serene, as if they were steering toward something they very much wanted to reach. The keeper who recorded the most disturbing experiences at Cape Hatteras was a man named Unaka Barnett Jennett, who served as assistant keeper beginning in the 1910s. His journals, which are partially preserved at the Outer Banks History Center, describe a series of events that started as curious and became genuinely frightening over time. In his early entries, Jennett wrote about sounds he heard at night beneath the lighthouse, rhythmic knocking coming from below the foundation. He assumed it was debris from the ocean washing under the structure. He stopped assuming that after the 3rd week, when the knocking came on a night of perfect calm with no waves at all. Then Jennett wrote about the smell. He described it as coming up through the floorboards on certain nights, a dense, rotting smell that was not seaweed or fish or anything organic he recognized. He wrote that it reminded him of the smell inside old ships, not the wood or the salt, but the smell of spaces that had been sealed for a very long time. On the night of October 3, 1918, he wrote his most disturbing entry. He had climbed to the top of the lighthouse to check the lamp and looked out at the water below. There was no moon, the sea was black, and standing on the surface of the water, roughly 40 yards offshore, was a human figure. It was not moving. It was not floating. It was standing upright on the surface, as if the water beneath it were solid ground. Jennett stared at it for what he estimated was 4 or 5 minutes. Then the figure turned and walked slowly toward the deeper water and disappeared beneath the surface without a ripple.
Janet was not the only one who recorded something like this. In separate accounts from different decades, 2 other lighthouse staff members and at least 3 fishermen described seeing a standing figure on the water's surface near the lighthouse at night. None of them knew about the others' accounts at the time they wrote them down. The descriptions are strikingly consistent: upright posture, no movement of the water beneath the figure, slow and deliberate movement before submerging, no splash, no disturbance, as if the water simply accepted it back. Local Native American oral tradition, specifically from the Lumbee people who have long inhabited the Carolina coastline, speaks of a spirit they called the one who waits below the break, a figure associated with places where 2 currents meet. It was not considered a spirit of death exactly, more a spirit of threshold, of the place between one thing and another. They believed it appeared at locations where the boundary between the ocean world and the land world was thinnest. Diamond Shoals, where 2 massive ocean currents collide directly below the surface, would be precisely that kind of threshold. This tradition was not invented after the lighthouse ghost stories emerged. It predates the lighthouse by generations. Now, here is the detail from 1999 that very few people know about. When engineers began the extraordinary process of moving the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse 2,900 feet inland to save it from coastal erosion, workers excavating beneath the original 1803 foundation stonework, they found a small iron box. Inside the box were 3 things: a piece of folded paper with handwriting in an old script that researchers identified as early 19th century English, a small bundle of dried plant material tied with cord, and a tooth, likely human, though this detail was never officially confirmed. The paper was badly deteriorated, but researchers could make out fragments. The legible words included "bound here," "turn away," and what appeared to be a name, though that portion was too damaged to recover. The most plausible theory among historians is that it was a warding ritual, something placed in the foundation to protect the lighthouse, or perhaps to protect the sea from the lighthouse, to keep something contained. Warding rituals involving sealed objects inside building foundations were practiced in various coastal communities in the early 1800s, especially in areas with histories of shipwreck and loss. But that raises the disturbing follow-up question. If someone sealed a warding object inside that foundation in 1803 and the lighthouse was moved in 1999, meaning that warding object was removed from its original position, then whatever it was meant to keep in place or keep away has been free for 25 years. The shipwreck rate at Diamond Shoals has not increased. No catastrophic events have followed the move. But fishermen along that stretch of coast still report the same things they always have: the knocking beneath the water on calm nights, the figure standing on the surface in the dark, the smell of sealed places rising up with no source. The lighthouse stands 2,900 feet from where it was built, shining its light just as it always did. But the thing in the water doesn't care about the light. It never did. It was always waiting in the space between the currents, between the surface and the deep, between what we can see and what we refuse to believe is there. So here is our final question for you. If something has been watching that coastline for over 200 years, what do you think it's waiting for? Drop your theory below. And if these stories kept you up tonight, that means we did our job. Like this video, share it with someone brave enough to handle the truth, and subscribe to Lost Beyond Sight, because we're just getting started, and the secrets we haven't told you yet are far darker than anything you've heard tonight.